Me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage. Here on GB News, we will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nana, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Good evening. Well, the French police partying in Calais as migrant boats leave the beaches. We'll speak to the Express journalist who's broken this extraordinary story of excess and clearly actually happy for the migrants to come to the UK. What on earth has happened to our £800 million? We'll talk about medical students. There is an exodus. Yes, they qualify, and then a third of them or more leave the country. Australia is facing a big vote next month. It could be Australia's Brexit-style moment. And the government are planning to ban disposable vapes to stop young people from taking up the habit. But will it actually work? Does banning things really make a difference? But before all of those important debates, let's get the news with Polly Middlehurst.
Nigel, thank you. Good evening. Well, the top story tonight, Poundland owner Pepco has agreed to buy up to 71 Wilko high street chain stores. It comes as the retailer prepares to close 24 of its outlets today, with the rest to shut by next month. That means over 12,000 jobs are now at risk, although Poundland says they do plan to offer roles to some Wilko team members where possible. And that comes as Barclays Bank is cutting over 450 positions. Unite, the union which represents employees at the bank, has branded the decision unnecessary and unjustified. They say it'll leave people concerned about their job security and livelihoods, and they've criticised Barclays for cutting jobs at a time when it's making big profits. 2 lorry drivers have been arrested in Romania, accused of being part of a major organised crime conspiracy to smuggle migrants into the UK in the back of lorries. Nicolae Toma is accused of attempting to smuggle 9 migrants out of the UK in 2020. Vasile Buklevi is suspected of having dropped 2 migrants he had smuggled into the UK at Thurrock service station in Essex in 2021. And that comes as GB News reveals that more than 3,250 migrants crossed the English Channel in the last 11 days. It coincides with the longest run of good weather so far this year. Home Office figures show 144 migrants crossed yesterday in 3 small boats. Today, 3 boats crossed carrying around 120 people. Now, a residential street in Glasgow was evacuated this afternoon after the discovery of a suspected unexploded ordnance device. Police Scotland say they were called to a property shortly after midday after it was found in the back garden. The explosive ordnance disposal team has been dispatched to the property. A cordon, we understand, is in place and people in surrounding properties have had to leave their homes as a precaution. Now, Surrey police say they're working to secure the safe return of Sarah Sharif's 5 siblings from Pakistan. The 10-year-old was found dead at her home in Woking in Surrey last month. Her father, her stepmother and uncle left the UK a day before with her siblings. Surrey police say they're working with their international partners after a Pakistani court ruled the children would be temporarily moved to a government childcare facility in Pakistan. Now, a pub company is to charge customers around 20 pence more for every pint of beer during peak times. Stonegate, which owns the Slug and Lettuce chain of pubs, says prices will increase at 800 of their venues on evenings and weekends. It's called peak time pricing. And it's previously been done in one-off events like the World Cup, but will now be introduced when there is a regular surge of customers. You're with GB News across the UK on your TV, in your car, on digital radio and on your smart speaker by saying play GB News. This is Britain's news channel.
Good evening. Well, over 3,000 people have crossed the English Channel over the course of the last 11 days. That takes us up to nearly 24,000 for the year. And one of the biggest tactics we've used since 2018 to stop this flow of these young men has been to give the French money. Yes, lots and lots of money to build fences, to fund policing, to fund equipment. But the funny thing is, it seems that the more money we give the French, the more migrants they send us. Now, I have tried at times to be rational about this and to say that to police a stretch of beach that is 70 miles wide, if you go from Dunkirk right down to Burke in the west, is a difficult thing to do. But the question that's often been asked is, are they serious about stopping the boats, or are they happy? Are they happy? And perhaps this is appropriate given that the Rugby World Cup is currently being played in France. Are they happy to play wing 3/4? That people cross the Mediterranean into Spain, Greece, they come into France, and of course because of Schengen there are no borders, and then they simply pass the problem on to us. And we've never really quite known the answer to that question. Astonishingly, if you look at the money we've given and the pledges we've made, we're now looking at about £800 million. Yes, 800 million quid is what we paid the French to stop the boats. And in a moment, I'm going to introduce you to somebody who's broken a big story in the Express. A story about French police partying. A story about their attitude towards stopping the boats. And we've got to ask the question, are we wasting our money? Love to get your views on that. Farage@gbnews.com. Well, big story from Zach Garner-Perkis, investigations editor of the Daily Express. Big piece in today's newspaper, powerful piece, and thank you for coming in. So you've been off to Calais. Were you sort of undercover, or how did you approach all of this?
So it was 10 days in Calais.
10 days.
10 days of... We basically went and we followed the police around. The hotel that they're staying at, the 4-star accommodation, if you ever accidentally book that, you'll find confused British tourists and then just about 50 or 60 riot vans. And we had pictures of them pulling their guns out the van, you know, getting changed into their flip-flops. And then what they really liked to do was go and get a bite to eat and then hit the town. And these aren't a couple of drinks after work. This is like, you get in at 11:30, you start doing the shots, you're there right the way through to, you know, 6 in the morning when you...
We have got, Zach, some video footage that you took, which we're now going to show our viewers here on GB News. And tell us what we're seeing here.
I mean, this is just this is a regular night in the police bar, the spot that, you know, they really love to go to. As you can see, it's pretty wild. You know, he's whipped off his belt there and you know, put it around a woman's neck. And, yeah, I mean, these boys go at it until the early hours. And what's remarkable is I'd actually see them down the next day at breakfast, full uniform on, looking very relaxed. And actually, because I spoke to some of these guys,
yeah,
you know, they're quite open about it. They say, Britain's paying for us to be here, you know, and whilst they're kind of strolling about in their sandals and you know...
No, I'm not a Puritan. You know, if they're out having fun, I'm not against that per se. But kind of the thought that whilst they're doing this, the launches are physically taking place, because they often launch, don't they, at 2, 3, 4 in the morning to get across the English Channel, is a bit rich. But it was some of the conversations you had with them afterwards that left me, Zach, absolutely stunned. When they basically said that, you know, we don't stop the boats.
Yeah, I mean, I spoke to one of the officers and he said, yeah, I've caught the people on the beaches, I've let them go. I spoke to another military police officer that said, I've got the skills to go out there and stop the boats and, you know, stop them going into the water. I can't because my boss will tell me, you can't go over that side, that side, you know. The local police, the military police, they just had to watch them go out. So, yeah, it happens. They let them go across.
Well, it does happen. Now, we've got some fresh video evidence of exactly this problem, which we're going to show on our screen right now. So here's a large number gathering on the beach, being videoed. They know they're being videoed. The sun's rising. And as we scan round, we can see on the sand dunes, the police are just standing there and on the beach, just standing there, watching. We've got a second illustration of this, a classic, boastful TikTok video. Here they all are, traipsing down, about 70 of them, towards a dinghy that is already waiting. And again, as we scan round in a few seconds on this film, you will see a whole... There's the boat you can see in the background. And we scan round, we see 3 police officers, and they're literally just... There we are, standing and watching. So, Zach, you've exposed the culture in a way we've not seen before, and well done you for doing it. How did they treat you as a journalist? British journalist.
Well, I would say...
Brexit British journalist.
Well, I would say that... look, they're quite open about this. This is not like... They were quite happy to come and have a chat to... standing around watching it happen because you don't think that it can be stopped. So, I mean, yeah, it's right the way through. And, you know, the interesting one is that within the local community, they're really happy because they feel that the presence of the police has cleaned up the town. They feel like, oh, we've got our Calais back. You know, it's safer here. We feel better going out in the evenings and all of those types of things. And it's like, that's how actually what they see their role as. They say we're here to secure the town, not to stop the boats. So, I mean, that's quite an interesting one.
Which, from a French perspective, you could almost kind of get. Yeah, if their first priority is to their own citizens. I wish our government thought like that. Now, Rishi Sunak is quite boastful. He says that the numbers are still down 17%. Interestingly, they were down 20% just a couple of days ago, but a few calm days, it all catches up. I mean, my contention, Zach, is that the only reason the numbers are down is that July and August, the weather was so awful.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, you have to have like reasonable weather to get those boats out there. And I mean, what I saw from spending those day and night in Calais, those police party, whether it's sun or rain.
Are they being paid a fortune?
So the way it works is that they're like a mobile unit that moves around. So they're self-sufficient, they do their own food, but they're on a 30% uplift as being the kind of travelling police. And what that's quite useful is if you've got your accommodation, if you've got your food, it's a nice bit of beer money, right?
Yeah.
So...
Yeah, well, clearly. Yes, I mean, I get that. Zach, have we wasted 800 million quid?
I think, short answer is yes. They need to have oversight, right? If they're going to spend the money, they need to have the border force embedded over there, checking what's going on, running the operations. I mean, what was interesting, right? So at our hotel, we saw on the last night a couple of British policemen coming down in the lift. Now, you could tell straight away they were British policemen. There were a couple there, one of the badges on their bags, which gave it away. But obviously it wasn't marked because they can't have it as British police. But it was really interesting about what are they doing there? What were they getting up to? How are they mixing with the French? Because look, I spent a lot of time with those officers. They don't take that posting seriously. When they're in France, when they're in Paris for the riots, that's the serious work. Calais, get your flip-flops on, get down the pub.
I can see it. Have you got more on this story to come?
We'll see. Look, the way that we did it, we sent 2 teams out there, right? So I had the hard job of following them around the bars. The other team were on the beaches, and they were they were there for 7 days, and they witnessed 2 crossings where they just got away in amidst police moving all around.
Extraordinary. Well, I've got to say, Zach Garner-Perkis, investigations editor for the online Daily Express, you've done a terrific job. You've exposed a very, very important story. Thank you for coming in and sharing it with us. Although I expect a lot of you at home and listening on radio will have been utterly furious to hear what Zach's just been saying. But there we are. That is the absolute truth of it. In a moment, we'll talk about an exodus of people who've qualified in the National Health Service, and we'll also go to Australia. There's a referendum coming up next month. The result is going to be just as dramatic, if not more so, than the Brexit vote here in 2016. All of that in a couple of minutes.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nana, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Just last night, I was outside the studio. Two young fellas, mid-20s, came up to speak to me. They were both in their 7th year, getting fully trained as doctors, and one of them said to me, "I'm off." I said, "What do you mean you're off?" "I'm off to go and work in Germany. The money's better, the conditions are better." The other fella said, "No, I will be staying as a doctor in the UK, but I'm just worried that taxes keep going up and up and up." Well, a survey that's been done, quite a big survey, suggesting that 1/3 of people who qualify, they've gone through the whole process of being medical students, 1/3 of them who qualify disappear. They go. They're going off to New Zealand. They're going off to Australia. They're going off to America. They're going off all over the world. They're getting a load more money, and somehow I just do not think this is right. Well, Kent GP, Dr. Julian Spinks, who's been on this programme before, joins us. Julian, we've invested a lot of time and money in these people. 7 years. I mean, goodness knows what the public cost of every qualified GP is. And they're free to just disappear. Hasn't something got to change here?
I think there has to be, and have to say that the investment they've made as well is enormous. And they're looking at the situation where, for example, the starting doctors' wages now are below people who they're supervising, and it takes about 11 years to actually get their total earnings to match things like physicians' associates who have to be supervised by them. They are working in a system which is falling apart, hospitals that are deteriorating with dodgy concrete.
So morale is bad.
It's really bad morale. So it's not just income, it's the quality of life, the fact they can earn more money, do less hours of work, be appreciated more, and maybe have a nice beach down the road. I'm not surprised they're talking about doing it. And the same thing's happening at the other end of the spectrum. The people of my age who are getting towards the end of their career, they've suddenly realised that they've maxed out their pension, they can't earn any more.
Yes.
And they say, well, why do I stay here? I can go and get more money and have a better lifestyle over there for a few years.
So we have a massive problem. And, of course, like so many other sectors of British life, we finish up with a shortage of trained people for a variety of reasons, and we rely on immigration to plug the gaps.
That's what's so crazy. We're training people to man the Australian, New Zealand or whatever health service, and then we're bringing people in often from countries who desperately need those doctors.
West Africa or whatever it may be.
Absolutely. So we've got to find a way to keep them.
You see, to me, I mean, look, it's a long apprenticeship, but ultimately, when you get there, you can earn a very good living. You can do private consulting on the side. It may be a long apprenticeship, but there is a big prize, economic prize, ultimately, for those that qualify and move on. You see, I think there was this old Victorian concept, sort of Dickensian concept of indenture, that you had to sort of work your indentured period. And I think if we've invested 7 years of our expertise, our time and our money in training these people, don't they owe it to us to give us at least a few years of service before going abroad?
I think what they'd say is that they have student loans often well over £100,000. And so I think we've got to look at carrots rather than sticks. But the carrots could actually result in a degree of service. And the thing I look at is, the army will pay you a bursary to train as a doctor, providing you work a certain number of years, or you have to pay back the bursary. But, why not look at all those student fees they're paying, the student loan, and write off some of that in return for doing a certain number of years' service in the NHS? That actually doesn't front-load the cost, because for the government, they don't want to spend lots of money right now, but because people pay student loans back over a number of years, it spreads the cost for the government, and it means that there is a financial incentive for people to stay on. Not right now, because obviously, if you start as a GP, you're well below as a doctor, you're well below the amount that would mean you pay back your student loan. But it's a way of trying to encourage people to stay on, whereas if they leave the country, then unfortunately they get the full fees again.
Yeah, and they're running up, as you say, big debts. The interest rate on those loans is about 7.5% now, I think.
It's a crazy amount.
Or something like that.
My children who are not doctors, some of their loans are 3 times what they took out, simply because it's going up faster than they can pay it off.
More broadly, Julian, I have to just, whilst you're here, look at the amount of money we're pumping into the NHS. We're spending about 50% more of our GDP on health than we were less than a decade ago. And no one's seeing any improvement. What on earth are we going to do?
It's a very difficult thing to deal with because actually the health service was neglected for a time. We've ended up with a situation, it's rather like someone who's not bothered servicing their car. And they've said that because they've got to use all the money they have for the petrol they need from a day-to-day basis. And 5 years on, their car's falling apart, it's breaking down and so on. And that's what's happened to the NHS. And it's far more expensive now to fix it than it would have been putting some investment in earlier. But it is very...
But we are where we are.
We are where we are, and we've got to do something to actually tackle that. I mean, we've got, unfortunately, things like dodgy concrete means that money's going to go to that rather than actually building better hospitals. As a GP, I'm aware of the fact that we struggle to have actually enough consulting rooms. People want to see GPs, want to see other people. We haven't got the room to put them in there. So, there is a big challenge. But it does need a degree of looking at how we organise things again. And I think it can be fixed, but it's not going to happen in the next 2 years.
You've been a GP for a long time. How many years?
Well, in the days when we were, using quill pens, about 35 years. 35 years.
I will bet that when you started, public trust in the National Health Service was incredibly high.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
How far has it fallen?
Well, I've spent sort of about 32 of those years absolutely defending the NHS and defending general practice. When people said, I can't see my GP, I'd say, hang on a minute, have a look at it. Now it's getting more difficult to defend it. We are still working our cotton socks off to try and make sure we can see people, but at the same time, we can't actually meet demand. And I can't say to people, oh, you'll always be able to see a GP, you'll always get a consultation in a very short order. It's just not there anymore, and it's not for want of trying or a desire to actually do that and provide that service.
Now, Julian, we were talking about junior doctors. You're a more senior doctor. You could go to Australia. And it's interesting. Of those medical students that want to go, 40% of those that want to leave the country want to go to Australia. You could double your money and go to Australia and live in the sunshine. Is it tempting?
I could, and I have had targeted ads saying, why not come to Queensland? Why not do that and so on. I have to say that I am very happy as a UK GP, despite all the problems. I really like working there, and it's always been a thing for me about paying back to people and actually helping people. It's the thing that gives me the buzz rather than just the financial side.
I believe you. Julian Spinks, thank you for joining us again. Well, talking of Australia, let's go to Sydney right now. It's some unearthly hour, but Alexandra Marshall, freelance writer and contributor to The Spectator Australia, is there waiting for us. Thank you for getting up in the middle of the night. It's a story, Alexandra, that hasn't as yet hit the British press in any way at all, but I think it's going to. I think Australia may be heading for a referendum result even more dramatic than Brexit. Please explain to a predominantly British audience what this referendum is about and what's going on.
Well, as the online editor of The Spectator Australia, don't worry, Nigel, I never sleep. And I have published hundreds of articles about the referendum in Australia. Basically, it's the voice to Parliament, and there are two views of thought. You've got the left side of Australian politics who are saying this is essential to recognise Indigenous people, and you've got the bulk of Australia, everybody else saying, actually, no, we do not want to include a race-based clause into our constitution. And I saw an article in the British press about this being simply about recognition of Aboriginal people. No, that would be a preamble in our constitution. What is happening is they're creating an entire racial bureaucracy of selected members, not elected, who will get to have oversight using the High Court about any parliamentary decision that goes through any law, as long as it impacts an Aboriginal person, which is, of course, everything. And the problem that the Prime Minister has got right now is that the more people hear about it and the more people learn and the more detail they read, the more they vote no.
Yes, I mean, the idea that one racial group has a different set, a superior set of rights to another is clearly catching hold in Australia as being a bad idea. But one of the reasons I liken it to Brexit is, let's, for example, take Qantas, the great Australian airline. And what have they done? With all of their planes, they've emblazoned, and here we are, we're showing some pictures now. Yes, 23. There it is, emblazoned on Qantas aircraft, and there's a didgeridoo being played there, and some Aboriginal dancing and chanting going on, and we're all supposed to think this is wonderful. And Alexandra, it is the big corporates. It is much of mainstream media. It is, you know, central Sydney, central Melbourne, trendy opinion. It feels like Brexit because it's the people against the establishment.
You're quite right, it certainly is, although it is operating in a different political climate. And the reason that things are falling apart for the Yes campaign is, one, people never like it when celebrities and the privileged class start preaching to them. It doesn't work well, didn't work well in Brexit, it's going down terribly here. I don't know if you saw, but the unofficial Australian anthem of The Voice by John Farnham, they've used that for the Yes campaign, and that sank the vote even further. But we've got this unusual environment where Indigenous people have the loudest voice in Australia per capita of anybody. They've got thousands of Indigenous bodies. They've got more race-based rights than anybody else. They've got about $40 billion a year in money that goes to them, which is more than 3 times what's spent on any other citizen. And in that circumstance, we had Western Australia pass these Indigenous heritage laws, where an Aboriginal body within 2 weeks started basically trying to blackmail the green groups for planting trees. And just yesterday, we had an Indigenous council place a native title over 3 suburbs in Brisbane. And all of these things are making the Australian population quite cynical toward this entire movement. It's not a spiritual connection or recognition, which people are in favour of. It's very much feeling like something Marxist-y, a little bit black activism, something they imported from the US. It's not Australian. We are a nation of migrants, and equality under the Constitution is fundamental to the survival of our country.
Fascinating. So, Alexandra, what will the result be? Come on.
Well, the way things are going in the polls right now, it is a very definite no. Every state currently has no in the lead, except for Tasmania, which is bizarre because they're the only Conservative state in Australia left. But, you know, it's Tasmania. What can you do? But anywhere where there's been any kind of conflict with these native title acts, it's gone toward the no camp. And even Victoria, Nigel, which you would have seen on the news during all that COVID stuff, even Victoria is currently voting no.
I love it. Thank you so much indeed for joining us at this time of the day and giving us those explanations. And yeah, you know, because you think that injustices were done in the past, well, creating modern injustices doesn't actually put that right. Well, it's all enough, I suppose, to make you in some ways want to go down the pub. But the problem is, if you go now and it's busy, well, you may find you have surge pricing and those prices have increased. Would it be fair to say that actually the price of a pint is high enough as it is, and what this particular pub group is doing is simply profiteering at your expense? We'll debate that in just a moment.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton, for 2 hours packed full of unfiltered opinions, unique takes and fiery debates. I guarantee you blockbuster guests and exclusive reporting with no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I think there is a culture of collusion, quite frankly.
And no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
So the Stonegate Group have 4,500 licensed premises across this country, and in 800 of them, they've decided to introduce surge pricing. This means at weekends or in evenings when it's very, very busy, and the price of their drinks will go up by 20p or perhaps as much as £1. I'm a bit surprised by this. It seems to me to be the opposite of happy hour. Happy hour used to happen in pubs and bars, actually when the most people were there, perhaps trying to get them to spend even more. Which model works economically, I'm not sure, but is the whole thing not just the most gigantic Mickey take? Well, I'm joined by Hugh Osmond, founder of Punch Taverns, one of the UK's largest chains of public houses. Hugh, surge pricing in pubs is a very new concept.
Yes, and I'm really glad to see somebody else trying it first. Look, it's not a new thing to adjust prices according to how busy you are. We see it in hotels, we see it in airlines, so it's not an entirely...
Or even Uber.
Yeah, and even Uber, exactly.
Yeah.
So it's not a new concept. It's been talked about in the drinks and restaurant industry for quite a long time. Obviously, there are times, as you've just said, people make it cheaper. So a happy hour is, if you like, reverse surge pricing.
Yes.
And I think possibly, so long as you are saying that prices will be cheaper when we're quiet, it is perhaps legitimate to try charging people more when you're busy. I mean, we do expect, if you go out after the pub to a nightclub, which I'm sure you're going to do later on this evening,
of course,
drinks will be more expensive. So I think there is some justification for it, but I'll be very interested to see how it works and how Stonegate do.
Well, the Stonegate Group have responded by saying, Stonegate Group, like all retail businesses, regularly review pricing to manage costs, but also to ensure we offer great value for money to our guests. See, it seems to me from a business model perspective that what they're saying to their punters is, when it's busy, you'll pay a lot more, and when it's not busy, you'll pay the same as you're paying now. Doesn't strike me as being a very good incentive.
No, I'd agree if it works like that. But I think that, for example, the principle of happy hour was really always that you got people in when you were quiet, and then hopefully they stayed when prices went up. So the principle of kind of starting cheap and pricing going up isn't, as I say, new. I think that, I mean, the most important thing for any food or drink establishment, to me, is that you get lots of customers in. And to do that, they have to be reasonably happy. So if they just raise prices without any time lowering prices as well and giving people extra value, I think they'll lose customers and they'll be back where they started or worse. But so long as there is a mix of cheaper prices at quiet times and higher price at busy times, I think it's OK. And you do have to, well, it's been a really bad time for pubs in the industry. The last 3 or 4 years have been the worst I've known in hospitality.
Lockdown, everything else.
Everything else. I mean, I've been in the industry, dare I say it, since the early 80s.
Yep.
And this is the worst period of hospitality, the worst 3 years I can ever remember. So people are trying to do things differently and trying to do things new and trying all kinds of things. And you've got to put this in that context. But as I say, I think it's an interesting experiment, and what they have to do is say, if you come when we're quiet, we'll give you a really good deal.
Yeah, no. I mean, if it was sold to me that way, I'd think, oh, well, maybe we go in now or whatever it may be. I know that Wetherspoons have sold off 35 to 40 of their premises. How are you getting on with Punch Taverns? Are you maintaining your stock of pubs? Are you getting rid of some?
Well, I think we are hoping that things return to normal. I mean, basically, or return to normal. That people. I mean, there were there are good signs in drinking pubs, or there were good signs. It's not been helped by having a really bad summer, July and August. Global warming has come late this year, as you'll have noticed, and September has been a lot better for the industry. All is not lost in the pub world. That is for sure, and it's just a question, I think, of people fully getting back in the habit of dropping into pubs, not thinking they have to book, just going out spontaneously, and the good pubs will come through it.
Well, I hope they do. For your sake, and for the sake of local communities and everybody. Hugh Osmond, thank you for coming in and joining us this evening. A big day in Washington, D.C. The Speaker of the House, Kevin McCarthy, giving a speech a couple of hours ago. Have a listen.
These are allegations of abuse of power, obstruction, and corruption. And they warrant further investigation by the House of Representatives. That's why today I am directing our House committee to open a formal impeachment inquiry into President Joe Biden. This logical next step will give our committees the full power to gather all the facts and answers for the American public. It's exactly what we want to know.
So there we are. That is a big moment on Capitol Hill today. And I have to say, I'm not surprised. I thought in the end, everything had to catch up with the Biden family when the Hunter Biden laptop broke in 2020, and we realised the sheer extent of the money that he'd earned from a variety of companies and regimes around the world. $20 million for somebody who's drug-addled with no real business experience at all. That asks questions, but recent testimony through committees has alleged that Joe Biden himself, as Vice President of the USA, was on the phone up to 20 times during Hunter's business calls with firms in Ukraine, Russia, and perhaps even China too. But I think something bigger is going on here. Biden's level of competence, or should I say incompetence, reached just the most embarrassing levels in Saigon 48 hours ago. In fact, he was talking such gibberish that halfway through a live press conference, his own press officer interrupted him and said, ladies and gentlemen, that is the end of the press conference. He gives a terrible image to America abroad. No one quite knows really what American foreign policy actually is in many parts of the world, the Middle East in particular. And I'll make this prediction. Number one, that Hunter Biden does face charges from the special counsel currently investigating him. And number two, my big prediction is that Joe Biden will not be the Democrat nominee to run for president in November 2024. The party are embarrassed by him. They've had enough of him. He will be gone. Trump, whatever his situation, wherever he is, will be, I'm certain, the Republicans' nominee, but it will not be Biden running again. I promise you that. Well, we hear the government are about to bring in a ban. They love bans, governments. Yes, this time it's to ban vapes, or at least disposable vapes, the accusation being that they're being sold in flavours and colours that are attractive to teenagers. But do bans on these sort of things work? We'll have a big debate on that in just a moment.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train. Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa!
Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
The March of the Puritans continues unabated because today we get councillors representing 16 local authorities, and in particular coming from Lambeth Council, where Jim Dixon, Cabinet Minister, is urging the government to change the legislation to ban outdoor smoking. Yes, that's right. They've banned indoor smoking in pubs and restaurants. They now want to ban it outdoors as well. I don't think they'll stop until they ban smoking completely, and indeed drinking as well, and turn most of us into criminals. But today's news is that the government is going to ban disposable vapes. Number one, they say they cause a pollution problem if not disposed of correctly. And number two, they're arguing they're aimed at kids. And if you look at some of the flavours, there's cotton candy ice vape. This vape is strawberry ice cream. And this one is orange gummy bear. Well, the argument is, the anti-vaping argument is that these are targeted at youngsters. And yes, about 15% of mid-teenagers do vape in some way. But whether banning things and whether putting all of this into the hands of the criminals is the right thing to do, I'm just not so sure. Now, Francesco Mosconi is Professor of Business Economics at Brunel University, London, and recently published in the British Journal of Healthcare Management an article saying that if adults switch from cigarettes to vaping, it could save the NHS a lot of money. So, Francesco, you're arguing in many ways that vaping can be a positive for society.
Correct, Nigel, correct. In the paper, what I'm saying is that if a 10% smokers adopted reduced risk products, and I'm thinking about e-cigarettes, for example, or heat not for burn tobacco, and assuming that there is a 10% risk reductions for developing smoking diseases like lung cancer, oral cancer, and so forth, then the overall population would experience about 3% decrease in hospital admissions, 3% decrease in health expenditure, which means essentially that the saving would be annually more than 100 million pounds in England.
Okay.
But, Nigel, in a more optimistic scenario where the switch of these smokers pass from, goes for 50% to these reduced risk products, then we're going to see a reduction in percentages of 13%, of hospital admissions, 30% of health expenditure, which means that the actual saving in England annually will be more than £500 million of pounds.
Francesco, that is powerful as an argument. However, the counter-argument would be, you're talking about adult smokers. We do not yet know the long-term effects of vaping, how negative it may or may not be. Do you think, is it your view, that by selling orange gummy bears, that the industry has targeted teenagers or not?
My view, I think, is very clear. We should not target children. We should keep our children, our kids, away from these products, because we call these products reduced risk products. So we're not going to see, zero risks. There are going to be risks. And if you're not an adult, you're not going to be able to choose. Let me tell you my position, if you allow me, on this. Disposable vapes, I think, create an environmental issue. We know that. And this will lead to additional costs. We know that because we are discussing today this. But if you ask me if I'm happy to ban products in general, as an economist, I would say, no, I'm not happy. Absolute bans historically don't work. Nigel, don't work. You think about the alcohol, it doesn't work. So in a perfect world, I would say, I would prefer not to ban them and instead focus on education, because this will lead to, let's say,
Well, Francesco, I have to say that I agree with you on that, and my worry is drugs are illegal, but huge numbers of young people take them, and if you completely ban these, the criminal gangs will move into it. Francesco Mosconi, thank you very much indeed for your testimony. Well, I'm joined now by John Dunn, Director General of the UK Vaping Industry. John, welcome to the programme.
Thank you.
Sir Chris Whitty has made it very clear that if smokers move to vaping, there is a reduced risk to their health. He says, though, if you're not a smoker, don't vape, but it is a useful way out. The worry, perhaps, that some people have got is it a way in to smoking, drug taking, whatever it may be? And, let's be frank, orange gummy bears, that's aimed at teenagers, isn't it?
Well, I disagree with you on that, but I have to agree with Francesco, and even...
Why do you disagree with me on that?
Well, first of all, adults like flavours, and one of the things that happens when somebody moves away from smoking into vaping is they want to move away completely from the taste of tobacco, anything associated with that. And adults like flavours. I know people laugh at me, but I'm a gin fanatic.
Nothing wrong with that.
And I have a strawberry candy floss flavoured gin. I like Haribo sweets. So adults do like these flavours. But what's really important here is to make sure that the products that are being sold are not being sold by vendors selling them to young people. And what we found is that there's a small minority of retailers that frankly don't care what they sell to whom. But the fines are very small. We had one retailer who was caught selling to a 14-year-old, and the fine was only £28. Now, that's ridiculous. So we want to see the fines to be a minimum of £10,000. Now, the government is doing that for cigarettes, they just announced, but why aren't they doing it for e-cigarettes in the same way? We're not going to object to it as an industry. In fact, it's our idea in the first place. The other thing we want to see is where these products are sold licensed. And that licensing, like alcohol, has to include robust age verification.
Which at the moment is not, of course.
Nothing is licensed, right?
Yeah.
So the products are licensed by MHRA, they're approved by them if they contain nicotine. But the stores that sell them are not.
No.
And we think that needs to change.
Okay, rather as it is for alcohol or
Absolutely,
no,
makes perfect sense to us.
No, I get that. Clearly there's pressure coming on the vaping industry. This government will introduce this ban on disposables. This government, all these governments love banning things. The argument is they're bad for the environment, but I guess that depends how you dispose. How worried are you that if we ban disposable vapes, that actually, and ban, and maybe even put more pressure through the World Health Organization on vaping as a whole, and they are talking about this. Do you worry this trade could be driven underground?
Absolutely. Everybody is coming out against what the government is proposing to do. Action for Smoking and Health, for instance, who are the biggest health charity out there dealing with cancer, they don't want to see these products banned. The Trading Standards Institute have said they don't want to see it banned because they know that it will just create a bigger black market.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. How big is vaping in the UK?
If you include those illegal products, you're probably looking close to £3 billion. But as your previous speaker said, is also have to add on the savings to the healthcare industry. 250 people die every day from smoking-related diseases. Not one single person has died from vaping a commercially produced e-liquid.
But tobacco companies, of course, sell vapes and cigarettes, don't they?
Some companies do, not all of them. But it's good to see them transitioning away from combustible cigarettes. But most of these products are not made by tobacco companies. They're made by entrepreneurs. They're made by good British companies. And we need to be applauding that because they are doing a good thing for people's health.
And the vape shop is now part of the high street?
Absolutely. It's been regenerative of the high street, I would have to say.
Well, not of itself, but certainly amongst all the charity shops, it's nice to see somewhere people actually are. John, thank you very much indeed. My guess, folks, is the government will ban disposable vapes. They will regulate the tastes that are allowed to be sold. They'll think they're really doing an awful lot of good, and it'll actually make almost no difference whatsoever. Coming up in a moment, State of the Nation with Sir Jacob Rees-Mogg. Jacob, what have you got today?
What have we got? Well, there's the extraordinary statement that we need China for net zero. And therefore, have we abandoned our moral compass? Are we willing to deal with a country that seems to indulge in genocide because of net zero, which seems to have become this god?
And this from Kemi Badenoch, who is the
so
darling,
sensible.
Who is the darling
So sensible.
of the Tory grassroots. Even she's gone to the other side, Jacob.
It just seems an inexplicable thing. So we're looking again at China and net zero, and then we're going to look at the triple lock. Now, this may be interesting to a lot of our viewers because the question is it affordable? Everybody wants to ensure that pensioners' income goes up, but can we carry on putting up...
With 8.5%. No,
that's right.
You're absolutely right. That's it from me. Let's have a look at the weather.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good evening. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update from the Met Office. Now, it'll be feeling much more like autumn across the UK to start tomorrow morning, but it'll stay cloudy and milder across the southeast. That's because the milder air is being more confined to the southeast as this front has cleared eastwards across the country throughout today. It's brought quite a lot of heavy rain, and that rain will continue across southeastern areas through this evening. Continued risk of thunderstorms until around 8 or 9 o'clock. But then behind that, we get a lot of cloud across the southeast, some rain and drizzle still over the hills and the coast, but many areas seeing clear and dry weather across the rest of the UK, and it will feel much chillier tonight than recently. A touch of frost is possible tomorrow morning in any sheltered Scottish glens. A good deal of sunshine to start the day across the bulk of the country. However, the cloud will thicken through the day, particularly across the northwest, and also elsewhere we'll get some fair weather cloud bubbling up. But in the northwest, we'll see some rain arriving as well. And the temperatures will be a little bit below average for the time of year here. Elsewhere, much closer to the September average, highs of about 18 or 19 degrees. Now, the rain pushes down from Scotland into northern England on Thursday, leaving many parts of northern England and Wales with a damp and cloudy day. Elsewhere, though, drier with a risk of showers in the north, and in the south and east, it will be milder and drier once again. It stays warm across the southeast into the weekend with cooler cooler, fresher weather, more restricted to the north.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me.